making homes more energy efficient for low-income families by providing insulation, hot water heaters, energy-efficient lighting to help families save money on energy bills and reduce demand on natural resources. Peter Lafare is another of our panelists. He's the executive director at Maker Housing Partners, the housing authority for Adams County. The organization owns, operates, and develops affordable housing units that help all Adams County residents access affordable housing. Maker advocates for housing initiatives nationally and administers more than $18 million annually in housing choice vouchers, serving more than 1,600 households.
We've also got Christy Galarza. She's the housing manager for Lake County Build a Generation, which is a nonprofit in Leadville. And she's helping local officials there make more affordable housing. And a key part of Christy's work is figuring out how to turn these 100-year-old Victorian homes in Leadville that are zoned in for one family into multifamily living and making those homes livable with all their aging infrastructure. And then finally, we've got Brian Connolly. He's an attorney at Ott & Johnson and an expert in planning and zoning. He's also a champion for housing for people with disabilities, and he helps clients and local governments navigate zoning laws, which we all know play a huge role in whether affordable housing gets built. And he's also a law professor at CU and DU.
So just before we get started with the discussion, for some context, as we know, the lack of affordable housing units is a crisis across the state and the country. At the Colorado Sun, we're writing about housing nearly every week. Recently, our education reporter visited Eagle County, where Habitat for Humanity is building homes for teachers on land donated by school districts. We've also reported that on the Eastern Plains, a volunteer economic development organization is offering homes with less stringent income restrictions. And in February, Denver officials proposed a plan for a new affordable housing rule that would require new housing developments to set aside at least 8% of their condos and apartments as income restricted housing for 99 years.
Yeah, and we're going to kick off, our conversation here with these four awesome panelists by having everyone share kind of a data point or an anecdote about, that really demonstrates how the housing crisis is affecting Colorado. And in preparing for this, I had a chat with the state demographer this week, which was really fascinating. And I just want to share a bit of data to kick this question off. I found out from her that there are only 6 counties in the entire state of Colorado, out of all 64 counties, that actually built more housing in the last decade, like 2010 to 2020, than they did in 2000 to 2010. And so what happened there? It was the Great Recession that just kind of tanked building homes, building apartments, all of it. So obviously, so many communities across the state are just way behind on building. And this really put in perspective for me, we're short on building homes, which is why we don't have enough for people. So those 6 counties, the only 6 that actually ended up building more housing in the last decade, that was Denver, Boulder, Jefferson, Cheyenne, Alamosa, and Bent County. And like I said, all the rest actually built fewer houses. The ones that were, the lowest on that list compared to the previous decade were Douglas and Arapahoe in, right here in the Denver area. And then we also had Mesa, Pueblo, and El Paso. And we're talking like Arapahoe County, more than 17,000 fewer houses than the prior decade. So thanks for letting me share my data point. So let's move on to our panelists here. I think everyone brought with them, something to really illustrate this crisis. So Peter, we're going to start with you, please, on that one.
Yeah, thanks, Jen and Tatiana, everybody who's tuning in. It's an honor to be able to share with you today and dig in together. I'm actually going to expand upon what you just shared, Jennifer. Last year, I had the opportunity to author a report with co-fellow Evelyn Lim at the Common Sense Institute, and we really were asking ourselves, how did we get here? How do we get out of this, and let's not blame and shame fellow Coloradans for where we are. Let's get together and be ingenuitive and innovative and drive forward to change. And so, as you articulated, we just stopped building homes right at the recession, and then we never started up again until about a year ago. And so, while yes, there was an absolute lack of liquidity, and we were reeling from the impacts of the Great Recession, and it was very difficult for us to build, and we lost the vast majority of our skilled labor, the folks, the men and women who go into making these homes a reality. We just, I think, lost our cadence and then started to question the validity of growth and its purpose, its need, its impact. And so, the lost decade really is 2008 to 2019. Because if we look at 2000 to 2007, we were kind of keeping pace. State demographer articulates that we need about one home for every 1.2 Coloradan households to get close to equilibrium, right? Where we can have some parity, we can see, modest and healthy year over year price growth and that's sustainable for all stakeholders. And so, we netted in new residents of about 75,000 per year from 2000 to 2007. And we created just under 48,000 units per year. And then in 2008, we produced 18,998 homes across the state, all types. And then in 2009, we really saw the impact of the recession, where we averaged 9,355. We produced 9,355 units that year. Mind you, we were still netting in. Folks were still expanding their families, moving to Colorado to start their lives and pursue happiness. And so we were consistently keeping at that pace of 75,000 new Coloradans per year. 2008 to 2019, 25,682 units produced compared to 77,000 netting in as average. So when we look at that, we've never been able to make up that loss. And I also think culturally, it conditioned us, as I mentioned previously, to really be skeptical as to what growth is going to provide, how we were going to be developing homes for Coloradans, where we'd be developing homes, and what affordability levels that we would. And I want to just benchmark that too with the abandonment of starter homes. And so Freddie Mac considers starter homes, this is all types, right? Attached products, single family homes, condos, etc. Being at 1,400 square feet or less. Pretty straightforward math, right? Hard costs are what they are. If we can keep the square footage reasonable, we can create a home that is vibrant and affordable in locations that are conducive to folks being able to live, work, and play in our Colorado lifestyle. And so, but in 1980 and the 70s and 80s, over 40% of all housing produced in America hit that definition. And then we've seen a precipitous decline. So as of 2020, only 9% of the homes that we're producing are 1,400 square feet or less. And across the entire country in 2020, that equated to only 65,000 starter homes. This is the price point that we are striving to get to, that is essential for us to be able to provide that stability and happiness a home can afford us. And so we are producing the type of housing that is legal, that is permissed, and that has the greatest opportunity to make it through a very volatile, highly emotional, non-logical entitlement permitting process. And that's why we are where we are from my vantage point. Thanks, Jen.
Wow. So we're building far fewer homes, to keep up with the population rate, but we're not building hardly any starter homes. That's interesting. Okay, Lupita, could you share your data point, please?
Part of what I'm doing in the San Luis Valley is we do weatherization for homes, and we've been a part of a housing market study for the San Luis Valley with different challenges and opportunities for us. We were asking ourselves as a community, how do we grow and make choices for better and sufficient housing for our people that live here? And so we were trying to think outside the box. And there are many challenges with housing, and major challenges in our region are, poor housing stock, older homes, abandoned homes, high costs of construction. And so in talking about that, it's caused a lot of poverty and homelessness here in the San Luis Valley. And so thinking outside the box, we had data of 10% of the homes in the state of Colorado are abandoned, and 30% of the homes in the San Luis Valley are abandoned. And right now we're doing a count of the homes that have been abandoned, and we're over 100 in the 6 counties so far, and we're still counting. And we're doing the research and finding ways where we can find the homeowners of the abandoned homes and looking for funding to purchase or ways for other people to purchase and provide rehabilitation to make these homes safe and affordable for people to live in. And part of what I do is, we do the weatherization program, but we also have been participating and partnering with other agencies to provide these safe homes and make them more energy efficient. So we did have a client that was from California that moved into the San Luis Valley in an abandoned home that was a family member's home. And we, use several different programs that we have here at Energy Resource Center to provide a safe home. We used our crisis intervention program to put in a new heating system. The elderly lady that moved into the home, she had a wood stove, and she was sleeping right next to the wood stove because the home had been abandoned for about 10 years. And so it needed a lot of work. It was infested with mice. It was just a horrible living environment. And so, with Energy Resource Center, we believe everyone needs a safe and healthy home. And we are, trying to provide energy audits on each home to see what homes need. And that's what we base our services on. We provide energy efficient furnaces, water heaters, refrigerators. We do insulation, air sealant, carbon monoxide, and smoke detectors. We even do solar to try to lower costs of their utility bills, their electric bills. And we have such a need in the San Luis Valley that we're looking at the abandoned homes. And we partner with San Luis Valley Housing Coalition because they have a grant program that the interest is really low for people to be able to afford it for their payments and things. So we partner with them they do majority of the work at the beginning, and then we finish it with energy efficiency through our program. But it's just caused so much homelessness. We have a homeless camp right behind our building, actually here, that they're building small little huts there for the people that are moving here to be, in this homeless camp. And it's really sad to see so much of it here in the San Luis Valley and rural areas because of the cost of rent increasing. And we have limited services, so it's creating a high cost of living here in the San Luis Valley. Even if the region's housing appears affordable, it's not. Prices are raising each day. We have one of the guys that work with us that, they just raised his rent $120 a month. And that has made a big difference in the amount of money he makes. More of that has to go to housing than to provide other services and meals or medications and things like that. So if it's happening to our own staff, it's happening to our elderly. Other people in the San Luis Valley, we have the poorest counties in the state. And so we want to rebuild these abandoned homes to give, people that used to live in the valley a chance to move back and make it more affordable for them, or to avoid homelessness wherever they are at. And if they come to a house that their family used to own, it makes it so much easier for them to have that, have services around the San Luis Valley.
I love that you are the conduit between all those abandoned homes and all these people that need a place to live. I want to come down there and visit you and see you do this. It's awesome.
Yes, it's a process, and I've been with Energy Resource Center a little over 8 years. So I know the community. I know people in each of the counties. So a lot of them will, you know, will come to me because they already know me, or I work in so many different boards that my name is just out there. Our agency is just out there.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, let's go to Brian. I know he brought charts to show us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me and for hosting this. I am going to share my anecdote through a series of images. These are all from a report that was done as part of the Colorado Housing Affordability Project, which is a group that I'm involved in that is working to advance affordable housing goals around the state. So if we could show the first chart, we often look at housing affordability through what we call cost burden. So a cost burdened household is a household that spends more than 30% of its income on either rent or the cost of ownership. And I realize there's a lot of data on this chart, but I would draw everyone's attention to the middle lines and both the renter cost burden chart and the owner cost burden chart. And what those middle lines show is that both owners and renters who have household incomes between $35,000 and $75,000 a year have experienced massive increases in cost burden since 2000. In 2000, for example, in some of these are key counties and cities around the state that we looked at. We saw, for example, in Colorado Springs in 2000, renters that were earning between $35,000 and $50,000 a year spent about, they were 13% of them were cost burdened. Now, 58% of them are cost burdened. We see that all the way up into households that are earning $75,000 a year. Now, about a third to a half of households are cost burdened, even if they're making up to $75,000 a year. And that's a very significant increase. If we go to the next chart, we can break down where these cost burdened households live in terms of what kind of units they live in. So this is for renters. So people who earn under $50,000 a year have always been cost burdened, and you see their cost burdened across the different types of housing units that they might live in. But when we look at people who are earning $50,000 to $75,000 a year, or even up to $100,000 a year, the type of housing unit that one lives in makes a huge difference as to whether you're cost burdened. For example, 46% of $50,000 to $75,000 a year households who lived in single family homes were cost burdened. At the same time, far lower numbers of those households were cost burdened if they lived in duplexes or triplexes or in multifamily housing. And if we go to the next image, it shows the same information for owner households. So if you live in a home that you own. So then when we go to the next image, we can break down these types of units based on what we're building. So we saw in the last couple of images that single family homeowners or people who rent single family homes are far more likely to be cost burdened than those who live in multifamily units. This chart shows what types of units we've been building here in Colorado since 1980. The blue part of the bar chart at the bottom is for single family homes. So you can see the vast majority of building permits that we've issued here in Colorado, even in recent years, have been for single family homes. The orange part of the bar chart reflects multifamily projects. So projects that have 5 or more units in a building. So that was the second largest number. But yet those most affordable forms of housing, those duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes, reflect very few of the building permits that have been issued in Colorado over the last 40 years. And we can barely even see them on this bar chart because they're the little green and light blue splotches in the middle of the bar chart. So why are we doing this? Let's go to the next image. When we look at zoning, and I've chosen to show maps of Jefferson County, not to pick on Jefferson County, but just to show this is emblematic of what's happening around the state. When we look at zoning and what the rules that control what type of housing we can build, we see that zoning vastly prefers the construction of single family homes. So this map looks at Jefferson County and the land area that's zoned for single family homes. And the pink areas are all zoned for single family homes. The gray areas are areas that are parks or federal lands where housing or any type of development can't be built. But we see a lot of the county you can build a single family home in. Let's go to the next map. This map shows where you can build accessory dwelling units. So accessory dwelling units, for example, can only be built in a very small portion of the county. The lighter pink areas require extra government permitting to build an accessory dwelling unit. Let's go to the next image. These are areas where you can build these are areas where you can build a duplex in Jefferson County. So again, a very small portion of the county is zoned for duplex development. And then the other two images that just flashed across the screen show where you can build triplexes and where you can build multifamily residential units. Those again are very small portions of the county. So when we compare what we're allowing for single family housing versus multifamily housing, we allow much more single family housing, which probably tells a lot of the story as to why we are where we're at. We know we need more housing and more affordable forms of it, but we're really not zoning for the right type of housing to increase affordability.
Right. That was great. Thank you so much. Christy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here today. And Brian, I think you hit the nail on the head about we are continuing to perpetrate these zoning policies that are not only racist but classist. They were established way back in the 60s, sometimes farther back, and we need to do a lot of work to revamp it. In Lake County, one of the strategies we're using for that is trying to encourage people with lived experience for housing instability to talk to the decision makers and advise them on what rezoning could look like that could help address some of these problems. So I'm really grateful that you showed some of those maps to help tell that story. In Lake County, we're a very rural community with about 8,000 population and very limited financial resources. But one of the things that we struggle most with is second home buyers. So we are very close to a lot of the resorts. We're very close to Vail and Copper Mountain and all of that. And the average worker in Lake County can afford a house that is priced at about $320,000. And I pulled the housing list for this month, and the average home price is $765,000. So we know in our community that the majority of the houses that are being bought right now are being bought by second home buyers, either to be used as a vacation home or to be used as a short-term rental. We know this because our teachers and our hospital employees and our county and city employees, they cannot afford the houses that are being sold in our community, whether those are new construction or just being resold on the market. And so this continues to be like a really, really big struggle. If you think about it's well over double what our community members could afford without being cost burdened. And so what I will encourage everybody to remember is that there's never going to be one silver bullet to solve the housing issues. You must try every single thing possible. You must build out all the programming. You must adopt all the policy measures, because the market is continuing to say that the person with the most money is the person who is going to get the housing, and that's not always going to be your community members.
Great. Thank you, Christy. And while you were talking, we had a question from the audience that was really relevant to what you said, and I want to give the other panelists a chance to answer that. But Anna is asking about that impact on people buying, second, third, fourth homes in the mountains or wherever. And if anybody has any data to say about that, or the impact locally for you in terms of people buying up all those extra homes.
I'll just say that there is a lot of data around what the impact of those purchases is, and it is that, it takes housing off of the market. We know how many housing units, this is based on census data, we know how many housing units are second homes or are unoccupied or are vacant. We also have good data on short-term rentals as well. The question just becomes, how do we produce housing to offset the impact of those second, third, fourth home purchases? We can't prohibit people from buying second homes, but we can create housing and the right types of housing to make more affordable housing and offset that impact.
Great, thank you.
All right, looks like we're off to a good start. I'm not easily shocked, but I was shocked by some of those statistics. Just like we do in our stories, we like to ask our sources or our experts that we interview how a specific topic we're reporting about affects real people across the state. Some of you have already kind of touched on that, but I wanted to just see if each panelist can share how the affordable housing shortage is affecting people across the state or in their specific community. And I think bonus point if you can share how the crisis is affecting people with higher salaries or wealthy people. If we can start with Christy, that would be great.
Sure. So I mentioned earlier that Lake County is very close to a lot of the big resorts, and 75% of our community members commute down to Eagle and Summit County every single day. That can be about a 3-hour round trip commute. And so one of the things that we are noticing is that the labor shortage that is happening in the construction trades nationwide is much more prevalent here because the folks who work in construction trades are working over in Summit and Eagle County and making much more than we can pay them here in Lake County. And so one of the things that we are trying to do to address this issue is our college and our school district has created something called the Construction Trades Program. If you guys remember, back in the 90s or early 2000s, all the construction trades programs were cut. There were no more shop classes. There were no more auto body classes. So we're trying to bring that back, but we're also trying to tell the story to parents that actually working in the trades is a really good deal. And when you are making that commute over the mountain every single day, that's costing you between $17,000 and $20,000 annually. So if you have to take a pay cut to stay in our community and work and build homes in our community, not only are you contributing to addressing the problem that's probably intimately affecting your health, you're also getting more time back with your family and just creating a healthier community in general. So also our Economic Development Corporation and our Workforce Center are trying to do a campaign to recapture a lot of our workers who have been working we call it over the hill, for decades. So that's one of the ways that it's impacting us here in Lake.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Next, can we go to Brian?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, in terms of kind of personal anecdote about how the affordability crisis is affecting, and Tatiana, you asked about people who maybe even earn higher incomes or higher incomes, professional level incomes. Our law firm, we represent landowners and developers of housing and of other land uses throughout the state. And we routinely hear from employers that they're having an increasing difficulty in trying to recruit employees to work here in the Denver region. So, you've got, particularly as you've got younger people who are already under a crushing student debt burden and are trying to find good regions to locate in. Those folks are the people who really drove the economic boom that Colorado experienced in the last 15 to 20 years. And we're hearing a lot of stories about those types of workers saying, I can't take your position in Denver because I can't afford to live in Denver. Or at least I can't afford to live in Denver at the salary that you're offering me. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. I did hear recently that we had a significant slowdown in population growth in 2021 or 2020, I guess it was, which of course was undoubtedly related in part to the COVID pandemic. But I think we're going to see that as housing becomes increasingly expensive and our wages have not kept up with the increases in housing prices, that more and more employers are going to struggle to attract those employees. And really, those are the employees that have helped to drive the economic boom that we've seen.
Thank you. Lupita, I'm looking forward to your answer too.
So, and what we see is kind of the same thing everyone else is seeing is in what, we were looking for employees, a new crew, and it took 6 months to a year for us to find those to do weatherization. We partner with the Workforce Center. They have like job training programs. But we find a lot of people are commuting to work to smaller towns, other towns from where they live to find jobs. And now they're having to, with the gas prices and inflation with just lumber and things, they're having to look for jobs where they live, and it's not affordable for them. The other thing we've been doing is we have a lot of collaboration here in the San Luis Valley. And so we work with different agencies to try to get what we need and other people's needs met. As long as there's collaboration, we can help other agencies and they can help us. But we've also had issues finding some of the materials we need for construction. Just even getting furnaces, refrigerators, things, it's taking a lot longer. They're back ordering. So that affects all of the housing in the San Luis Valley, and it affects what we do. But we've managed to, like I say, collaborate and make it a little easier for us to meet our needs. It's just taking us a little longer to do that.
It's interesting, many of you bring up the labor and construction shortage. I remember writing about it after the Marshall Fire. This issue sort of came to a head after that. Peter, last but not least.
Yeah, this crisis of ours is, in my opinion, the challenge of our generation. It affects our national security because it affects our morale, and it diminishes our resiliency. And so, of course, I could share with you numerous stories of Coloradans of all ages that reach out to myself and my fellow colleagues that lead other housing authorities and nonprofits. Expressing extreme distraughtness that borders on to the point of giving up, of not seeing the Colorado economy, the Colorado society serving them. And that's really dangerous for us when it comes to our children, how they see themselves as representative of their government, of their society, of their community. And choices are made. And so, folks are living in their cars, they're couch surfing, their children are falling behind in school, not because they're not extremely gifted and talented, but because they have no stability. And so the impact is cumulative in every sector of our economy. And some folks now we're starting to see Denver is done or Colorado is done, and that becomes a momentum. One of the superpowers of Colorado has been hope, opportunity, and that wanderlust, right, that can allow us to accomplish anything we put our minds to. Coloradans are known as problem solvers. We're known as innovators. And there's a reason that so many people have come to Colorado to make their lives. And so, I would say, Tatiana, that, this impacts everyone, because when folks don't feel that there's a place in their society for them, they create their own society, and our society crushes that. And so we see rapidly increasing crime statistics. We see lack of new business starts. We see Main Street starting to flounder, and it has a impact, a synergistic impact that diminishes our ability to compete and to be able to provide, God forbid, folks have the opportunity to be happy. And so, we've been, I think Boulder recently in the last few years had been, designated as one of the happiest places in the world. There's a reason why there's innovation in Boulder, because when folks have the ability to take a moment and a breath, they innovate, they collaborate, they connect, and they serve. And so, this lack of our most foundational need is diminishing our service capacity, which is going to impact all of us.
Wow. I feel like you took that to a higher level discussion there, Peter. Thank you for that. And a lot of the reason we chose you for to come speak to us tonight is just because you've done such amazing work. You know, each of you have success stories. So we didn't want this to be a, all doom and gloom conversation. So wanted to give each of you the opportunity next to talk us through, like, a specific project or rule change in your community that made a difference and ended up getting someone housed or multiple people housed. So, Lupita, I love your sleuthing for these abandoned homes and linking them with people. And you did share with us about the woman, I believe, who was from California and had no home. But maybe you could kick us off and share a little more about that story or other successes that you've had down there.
Okay. So, the abandoned homes was just something that we thought of that was kind of out of the box because affordable housing is so hard to find. And so I do have another success story. And with this story, I did a partner with San Luis Valley Housing Coalition. We had an elderly lady that was 83 years old and her son that moved. They lived in the Front Range and they moved back to the San Luis Valley because they had a home here that had been abandoned for several years. And so when they came to apply through us, the Housing Coalition had sent them to us. So I talked to Dawn and we kind of coordinated to see how we can help. And so we did. I went out to do a visit at her home and she was living in this tiny shack that was on the property. And her son was living in another little shack. And then they had another little shack that was like their kitchen. And you see things like this and it just kind of breaks your heart, especially when it's elderly children. It just makes a more personal effect for you. And when I saw this lady and she was just a sweet, sweet lady, having a tiny little heater, electric heater, things like that. We went in through our crisis intervention and actually put some heating in there. We actually put a Renai heater in there. And then Housing Coalition came in and did restructures in the house. And as soon as they were done, then we went in and we did put in some new windows and things for her. So right now it took almost a year to complete everything that they needed because everything was kind of gutted out. And it was really nice to see the home once it was all complete. And this lady just thriving in what a year ago was a hard situation for her. And she lost her home, when she was living in the Front Range. So this was something that they had to do for themselves and he had to help his mother do. So the son came with her to try to figure out a solution. And somebody just did a referral to our agency and to the Housing Coalition. So we just kind of partnered. And so we do that with other agencies also, depending on what the needs are for the people that come into our community or what they're looking to do. And so, we've done a few houses. We're looking for more to see what other success stories that we can have. And that way it limits the amount of homelessness and people living off the grid. If we didn't do the services that we did for her, she would probably live off the grid in that little shack. And so, those are just some of the things that we've been trying to do in the San Luis Valley, learning from that housing study we did.
And you're actually seeing these abandoned homes and then going to the courthouse and figuring out who would own them and contacting them. And it sounds like they're usually people that have moved far away and still own property there, but, with a house that's falling down. Is that right?
Yeah. So we have actually, through the housing study, we built different groups. So we have like education and outreach, improvement of existing homes, rental housing shortages. And we had different people in our groups volunteer in each of those areas. So we have people actually driving around looking for abandoned homes. We're checking with county assessor to see who the owners are, see, how we can contact them, just to see if there is a way for us to make a difference in someone else's life.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
And Christy, I know you've got some hopefully happy news coming up in Leadville. I know you've been working for a while with public officials there on some zoning issues, and I'd love to hear more about where that's at and any other successes that you might have to share.
Sure. So we have a group that we call the Policy Advisory Team that's quite unique. We put together subject industry experts such as real estate agents and construction, I guess I would say developers. And we put them in a room with folks who are housing insecure, folks who may imminently lose their housing, or who are below average on income. And we work them through coming to consensus on recommendations for land use changes. That group has been working for over 2 years now, and they've made a recommendation to both the city and the county. And one of these recommendations goes to address something that Brian was talking about earlier about being able to build ADUs in duplexes within city limits. It was allowed by right, but because of this like weird quirk in our zone, it actually wasn't feasible. So we went through and I mean, we talked about it for like 6 months straight before we came up with a solution that was palatable to both the industry experts and the folks who need the housing. And we made that recommendation to City Council, and they are nearing completion of getting that put into code, which will be helpful for everybody involved. And we hope it will create more diversity in housing and less of the standard 2-bedroom homes that is being offered so frequently in our community. One of the other wins that we recently had is we recommended that the city put a ballot measure out to voters to increase the lodging tax. That's what guests pay when they stay at hotels, motels, and short-term rentals. So within the city, we could increase that amount. So we asked the voters to do that, and they passed it with by 70%, which is huge because things, if they pass in Lake County, they usually pass with like 2 or 3%, not a 20% margin. So that really said to us from our community that we see that the housing problem is real, and we back you in wanting to come to solutions. And I'm just going to pitch one more thing. One thing that we are interested in seeing happening is the reclassification of non-owner occupied short-term rentals as commercial enterprises. So what I mean by that is if a second home owner uses their home as a Airbnb, they should have to pay the same taxation, property taxation, that a hotel owner pays. Right now, because it's a business, right? Right now, they're paying the same property tax that a residential person pays. That's something that our elected officials are really interested in seeing happening. Unfortunately, it would require a state change. It's not something we could implement here in this county. I recently talked to Colorado State Representative Dylan Roberts about this. He attended one of the housing summits that I was at, and he said he's really interested in doing something like that, but there's not enough support amongst the other representatives. So if you want to help move the needle on this issue, contact your representative and tell them how important it would be for you to see non-owner occupied short-term rentals reclassified as commercial enterprises.
Thank you, Christy. Brian, you want to go next?
Sure. In my line of work, which is generally representing parties to the land use approval process, to the zoning approval process, I've had the opportunity to represent a number of developers of affordable housing. And I will say that the most rewarding projects are the ones that don't require me to be involved, right? So if you took that map that I showed of Jefferson County and you expanded the purple areas that you can use for duplexes, triplexes, or multifamily development, that reduces the likelihood that I need to be involved in a project. That means there's less cost to, that map right there. So if you increase the pink area, that means less of me, which also means less delay in creating a project. It means less cost to affordable housing developer. And it means less likelihood of having a public hearing where you have a bunch of, for lack of a better term, NIMBY neighbors who come out and oppose affordable housing. I will say that of the projects that I've been involved in, I have always enjoyed the ones where I go to a hearing. I have one in the Sloan's Lake neighborhood in Denver that was like this. I have one on the east side of Boulder that was like this. I've had others where you go to a hearing and the number of people who support the affordable housing project exceeds the number of people who are opposed to it. And it's unfortunate that it's taken an affordable housing crisis like the one that we're in to get to the point where community members feel the need to show up at a planning commission or a city council or a board of county commissioners hearing to support affordable housing. But the fact that the community is out there saying this is something we need is really rewarding. And for me, as the person who has to get up and usually give the presentation, hearing 50 or 75 community members come out and say that we want affordable housing in our community and we need affordable housing in our community, that's far more rewarding than anything that I'm going to say about why it should be rezoned or why it should be approved.
This may be obvious, Brian, but I was hoping you could expand a little bit, on that map when we're looking at duplexes, etc. Like, is that what people don't want when they have the NIMBY? And what's the problem with those, homes that fit 2 or 3 families? Maybe you can help us dissect that a little bit.
Yeah, there's a great book that was written. It was published 2 or 3 years ago. It's called Neighborhood Defenders, and it talks about the reasons why people oppose new housing in their communities. And the reasons range. They kind of run the gamut, right? Some people don't like the way that duplexes look, or they don't like the way that apartment buildings look. They don't like the idea that there's going to be more traffic in their neighborhood. Some people talk about things like community character, which may just be code word for I don't like the people who are going to live in those housing units, whether they're apartments or duplexes. But for anyone who's interested in this topic, I really recommend that book because it does a good job of talking about why people come out and oppose housing. It also talks about why people don't come out and support housing, and it's usually because new housing benefits the community as a whole, while it has its greatest impact on the people who live immediately adjacent to it. And the avenue for which people have to come out and oppose housing are land use hearings. If no matter where you live, probably at least one night a week, your community is hosting a hearing on some housing project somewhere in the community, whether in front of a planning commission, a city council, or a board of adjustment. You name which public body it is, there's probably a community meeting or hearing going on that offers an opportunity for people to come out and oppose or to come out and support some type of housing development.
Thank you. And Peter.
Yeah, and Anna just asked in the chat, that's a Neighborhood Defenders, and it's easily accessible if you Google it. Housing, playing a role and serving in housing an individual, a family, is akin to some of the most joyful moments of our human experience. I've had similar feelings that I've had welcoming my daughters into this world, spending time with my family, my loved ones. It's goosebump inducing. And so I'm going to share a story, that I believe demonstrates, what we see happening that could be scaled, that is indicative of the adaptive leadership that is required. This is really, there's technical challenges in this work, but this is a really adaptive leadership moment because we're trying to convince people to do things that make them uncomfortable, right? And so, for me, the Adams County Commissioners a couple of years back stepped in, outreached their hand to Maker and donated a decommissioned county asset, an old Children and Family Services building that was decommissioned because they were refurbishing an existing asset for the new Human Services building. So that's a location where kiddos were placed into foster care, albeit for reasons that were necessary, but extremely traumatic. And so that attacked the cost and allowed us to create a pro forma that was extremely financially viable, and also demonstrated to CHAFA, the Colorado Housing Finance Authority, that there was tremendous local support. Also, the county partnered with us to provide rebates and waivers that would make the project less affordable. And so we did an adaptive reuse and repurposed that building and breathed new life into that public asset. So the previous investments from Adams County residents were given honor. And then we worked with all different stakeholders, and the Sun highlighted this last year, and thank you for that. And so we created some youth aging out of foster care units at that to pay homage to the site and be able to turn a place that was unfortunately trauma-inducing into a place of respite. And so that's now open, 100% occupied. We see intergenerational families. We've got just a tremendous culture that is being built there, because they're just units until someone makes them their home, right? And so for us, looking up at those balconies, to me, is those goosebump moments and a demonstration of, and this is happening in pockets across the state. We just need to see it proliferate, right? And these are proven strategies that can have us overcome the barriers to affordable housing creation. And so the second, I'll also share another example. The Adams County Commissioners asked me, it was my honor to serve as the chair of the Housing Response and Recovery Task Force. It was stood up right in April of 2020. And we made it our mission to bring together a diverse collaborative of folks from all across the sector, right? So folks that don't usually sit down and break bread together virtually or in person, so that we could try to keep Adams County residents housed and landlords solvent. And this is before CARES Act, and then we moved into CARES Act, so there was money from foundations, and then that adaptive leadership together to overcome barriers. We brought in the market rate community, we brought in the affordable community, bankers, financiers, lawyers, and then we worked with the 17th Judicial Court to institute a rapid settlement program at the courthouse steps to, again, keep folks housed and landlords solvent. And we've served over thousands of folks, and 15 million and counting, and really created an ecosystem to address that housing instability dynamic that plagues our state and our country. And so now we've seen evictions reduce. They are ticking back up, and there's been some press around that. And I appeal to everyone who's watching and listening that we not abandon that ecosystem of stability, right? You know, we moved away from housing choice vouchers, which is really the foundational program in our country to keep folks housed. Only 1 out of every 5 eligible Coloradans and Americans receive one. Congress knows this. They just decide not to fund the program. And so absent that, we have a massive eviction problem in this state. And so to be able to serve during that time of need, it was if not us, who, and if not now, when. And I just saw, localities, the county, our court come together and create new pathways, new relationships that germinated into legitimate sustainability for most of the partners. So that's really what gets me up out of bed every day, and creating the units, letting the folks make their lives in them. Affordable community members are no different than anyone else. They have gifts and strengths and talents. They are not a threat. They are us, we are them, and those types of and there's many more I could share from a unit creation standpoint, but also serving during our time of need.
And I can attest to Peter's passion about this stuff, because he once gave me a tour of one of the new apartments in Adams County. A question from an audience member, and I didn't think we were going to get out of this conversation without talking about the sheep in Vail, and this is related to that. The question is really like, what efforts have you guys had success with in terms of meeting the affordable housing need while you're being challenged by this nimbyism. And anybody could take a crack at that. But I know, Peter, we've talked before about there's always a scapegoat. Maybe that's the wrong word to use when we're talking about the bighorn sheep here, but there's, there's a moral obligation perhaps to provide affordable housing, and the reasons that people use for not wanting it in their community are wide. So maybe that's more than one question, but anybody want to hit
I
that
got to
one
jump
up?
in and make sure I provide. I know we're closing in on time here, but I know for myself, life is full of threats and uncertainties and greatness, and I call back to my values to be my compass. And so, for me, a value is everybody needs a home, right? And poverty is systemic. It's not individuals. It's a number of elements that lead towards these outcomes. So no shaming and no blaming, right? And so that informs the trade-offs I make. A famous economist Sewell says, there's no solutions, only trade-offs, right? And so, what I saw in Vail, and I followed it closely because it was very important. I think it's a litmus test of where we're at, is that, those trade-offs weren't aligned with what the vast majority of public comment was sharing. But the Vail Council felt an obligation based off of their trade-offs, if we're taking things above board in this regard, right? And so the outcome was such. And so I think that, for us, also, I think it's comforting for humans, for us to realize that we're not all that different than generations that came before us. And housing has always created this type of pushback. We've just had more land, and we would drive till we were approved, right? The famous drive till you qualify. That's no longer an option, and we want to provide climate informed, resilient communities. We need to be infilling denser, walkable cities with mixed income, so folks can meet others and collaborate with others from different walks of life. And so what we see, Jen, is that I think folks feel like, wait a minute, like right out the gate, they get hyper emotional. And they feel like all the world, all their fears are just encapsulated in this new project. And we otherize renters. That's another element here. Like, we do not believe as a society that renters are, frankly, safe. And so what happens is that we say, well, renters are transient. And there's all these, tropes that when we dig in and we actually connect with our fellow Coloradans, regardless of their housing type, we have more in common than not. And I'll share that, that back in the 30s, when we were building brownstones in New York City, if we look at the historical record in the New York Times, folks were saying they're claptraps, they're horribly designed, folks are going to die, and the world was coming to an end, and they were vehemently opposed. And now there's some of us, our beloved architectural stock, and we're trying to get back to that. And so I think if we just reduce the pressure and the rhetoric and try to move away from binary constructs which create toxic conflict, we can find commonalities. And then at that point, our elected officials can make a decision based off of what is valued for their community. And I would encourage them to value a stable housing foundation so that their community can thrive in the ways that we've been discussing.
And Christy, do you want to talk a bit about how you would get homeowners, or when this has happened to you, local residents to support a project? Like, what's your process?
Thanks for calling on me, because I was going to ask if I could do that. So the public comment portion of these meetings are really built for someone who is a NIMBY, not in my backyard, not as much for someone who is a YIMBY. So what I mean by that is folks who are from higher socioeconomic backgrounds understand where to find these meetings, how to attend these meetings. People from lower socioeconomic backgrounds don't always know that, and they may need some support and some education on when to attend the meeting, how to give public comment and support like that. So that's when your community organizing is so essential. So we've been community organizing. That is what Lake County Build a Generation does for many, many years. And we like to empower the people who are most intimately impacted by these decisions, to tell them that, no, actually, you are the experts, and you can weigh in on this. And so what we usually do is we ask people to join our coalitions. Sometimes we can even pay them to be part of this group and learn about public speaking and how to prepare their statement. We even got some training from one of my dear friends, Jonathan Capelli, about what kind of statements are most impactful, right? What stories will actually be able to move the needle, and things like that. When you stay like calm and collected and say, but I actually have been in this community for a really long time. Here's how I contribute to this community, and here's why I'd like to stay in this community. Those types of messages, we know from the data, is more persuasive than some other messages that you might be prone to do. So I would encourage, if you are trying to drum up any YIMBY support, to really reach out to those community members and just hold their hand through it, practice it with them. And we even through COVID kind of got in the habit of recording people's testimony ahead of time and asking it to be played at the meeting if they were working, or if they were just like completely uncomfortable giving a live statement. And then, also we have partnered Latinx community members with translators to be able to share their story as well. So those are just a couple of ideas how you can get your community members comfortable and prepared to give that public comment that you need.
All right. This was a packed conversation with lots of good stuff in there. I know there's probably 3 or 4 story ideas in there that I want to snatch. We have 10 more minutes, so we're just going to take one more question from Gabriel on YouTube. They're asking, what are the ways that sustainable development can intersect with affordable housing to create solutions that work better for disadvantaged communities? I'll leave it open to whoever wants to take the question first.
So I'm sorry.
So go ahead, Lucia.
Something that we're doing in our community is we have, Peter touched on this a little bit, is rehabbing other buildings. And so we have 2 old schools that are being rehabilitated to be apartment complexes. And that is more of a creative solution. We have the Boyd School in Alamosa, and it'll be 13 units, but she's looking at doing a daycare on the bottom to still have that schooling for children. And so it makes it more sustainable if we can use buildings that are already in our communities. So we're not rebuilding, and it'll cut the cost for us also.
I think Peter or Brian, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, I mean, from my perspective, affordable housing is sustainable development. Sustainability writ large is, includes equity. And so, creating affordable housing is part of sustainability. One example, though, where sort of environmental sustainability and affordable housing development can go hand in hand is transit-oriented development. One of the things that the Colorado Housing Affordability Project has been advocating for is increasing allowance under zoning for more transit-oriented development. Here in the metro area, as many of the listeners know, we've created a fairly robust transit system, but yet we still have several local governments that have chosen not to zone for more affordable housing around their transit stations. Transit-oriented development does more than just allow for those more dense forms of housing that are lower cost. It also allows people to potentially not have to purchase a car, or maybe be a 1-car household instead of a 2-car household. The average American family spends, I think it's 13% of their household income on transportation. So if we can reduce transportation costs, we're reducing really the overall cost of living, which is just as important as reducing housing costs. So I think, there are many other examples of ways that affordable housing could be considered sustainable development. But I think that's one key way that we need to be looking at is how can we leverage the transit systems that we have? And that's not just in the metro area, that's around the state. How can we leverage those transit systems that we have to create more affordable housing?
Yeah, I'll echo that and share, like if we can start to allow by law, right, by building codes and zoning and entitlement processes for new building methodologies to take hold and expand, Colorado has the opportunity right now to be at the vanguard of offsite housing manufacturing. And that is not what most folks think of, right? This is cutting edge, climate friendly, net zero, less waste building methodologies. And there's just a bill that is going to become law soon here, the Innovative Housing Incentive Program, which is providing capital loans and grants for modular kit homes, 3D, prefab, all the elements that we know are missing. This is really, housing is the last sector in the global economy to be modernized. We still, and there's tremendous gains that are just being mitigated because we're not creating a competitive market because of our disaggregated project-specific regulatory environment. We haven't been able to get to the economies of scale that we need to be able to drive the per unit costs down. And so I would recommend folks take a look at HB 22-1282 because that is going to significantly allow housing creation that is going to drive down overhead and of those sustainable gains that Gabriel shared. I'd also say that there's some really interesting happening at Global LC Swansea comes to mind. Also rural homes for sale out in Telluride and Ridgeway, and that where there's deed restrictions. It's a land trust model where they're using these types of methodologies to drive down costs, provide ownership opportunities. So we need to increase the amount of home ownership via the methodologies that we've been sharing today for folks, as Gabriel mentions, in disadvantaged communities, because then through those methodologies, we can keep costs low, we can create equity opportunities, and be able to bridge that gap that from our big sin from back during the GI period when we were creating methods for home ownership, but we excluded BIPOC community members from participating in frankly, the largest wealth gaining moment in our nation's history. So, let's get more folks into ownership. Let's have more land trusts. There's a lot of great folks working across the state if we will allow them to build, as Brian and others have been sharing.
Firstly, thank you so much to our 4 panelists and everyone who joined virtually. We've got 4 minutes. I just wanted to check in and see if Christy and Lupita, if there's anything else you want to share before we wrap up.
And talking about how we spend most of our time in our homes, keeping people in the homes they do have is one of the most important issues that we're dealing with. And so part of what we do is try to keep people in their homes and make them safer for them. So if that's new heating systems, new windows, doors, where there's cold air coming in, we have 4 offices throughout the state right now, opening another one in Sterling. And all our services are free. You just have to qualify for the program. And so that's what makes it so much better for some of these people, is that they just have to qualify. And, some of them are getting solar panels to help with the electricity bills and having money for medications and things like that, food that they can't afford because of the high costs that they're paying right now.
Just wanted to mention one other cool program that we recently launched here in Lake County. Colorado Housing Finance Authority reached out to us to see if we wanted to pilot a program that they were calling the tool shed. They wanted to give us a grant to purchase tools for folks to do basic home maintenance. So I don't know if you guys remember earlier on, I said you got to do every single possible thing you can do to try to help solve this problem because it is huge. So this is one of the ways that we're doing that. A lot of the houses in Lake County are well over 100 years old and have significant delayed maintenance. Our library now has a variety of tools that our community members can borrow for free to do those basic home repairs. And we were one of a couple pilot programs, but I think if you guys are interested, you guys should hit up CHAPA to see if you can get something similar started in your community. And you're more than welcome to reach out to us here at Lake to see how it's going. And we'd be happy to tell you about it.
Excellent. Thank you all. Once again, thanks to our wonderful sponsor, Otten Johnson, and to our 4 panelists who brought us this engaging discussion tonight. And thanks for our readers and, those of you who are listening in on this and sending some really interesting questions for us to chew on. And that's what we're all about at the Colorado Sun is, trying to have a relationship with our community and our readers and putting on events like this where we can really just talk it out. It feels a lot like being in an interview for a story, but with, a camera and 4 different people answering questions. And it's awesome. So thank you all for being with us tonight. And we'll probably end up having a couple more events on affordable housing because there's just so much to tackle here and a lot that we need to do. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.